So welcome to this session on using generative AI for teaching English. My name is Claire Lee, and I am an English language fellow working with the US Embassy in Tokyo. To tell you a little bit about myself, I have been an English teacher and teacher trainer for 12 years, and I earned my master's from Harvard University and my bachelor's from Wellesley College. I was an English teacher in the United States before I moved to different countries around the world in order to teach English and do teacher training. So thank you so much for joining us today. Just to let you know that this session will be recorded so that it can be posted on the US Embassy YouTube channel. So this will be recorded. If you would not like to be recorded, please turn your cameras off and mute your microphone so that there is not background noise. There will be ample opportunities for questions throughout. Please type them in the chat box and I will try and make sure to answer them. But we will also have some time at the end to answer questions. So today we have 3 objectives. The first is to consider the benefits of using generative AI, which has really changed, I think, the world, as well as understanding its drawbacks and limitations. We will also identify ways to use AI to support teaching and learning, specifically how we as English language teachers can use it in order to lessen our workload. I know that teachers are very overworked, and so perhaps this is a way to support us and save some time. So we will start by defining what is AI and generative AI. We'll look at the benefits and drawbacks of AI, and then we'll actually see it in action. So I will be demonstrating to you how to use AI and give you some real examples. And then we'll also look at some other AI tools. So let's first start with getting to know each other. I'd love to know where everyone is from. Please share in the chat box your name, where you are teaching, and if you have used generative AI before. Generative AI includes platforms like ChatGPT, Bard, Bing. And if you have used it, have you used it in teaching? So I'll give an example in the chat box. I'm going to write my name, where I am currently, although I am from Los Angeles. And yes, I've used AI sometimes for teaching, but not in class necessarily. So you can see my answer. I wrote Claire. I am currently doing teacher training in Tokyo. Yes, I have had a chance to look through AI, although it took me a little bit of time to start using AI. And I do use it to support my teaching, but I don't necessarily use it in the classroom. There are many ways you can use it in the classroom with your students. And perhaps that is another webinar. But this webinar, we will focus specifically on how we can use it for ourselves as teachers. So welcome, great to see everyone. Welcome Midori Sensei, Numata Sensei. Wonderful. Fujisawa Sensei, welcome from Osaka. Maki Sensei, wonderful. Oh, great to hear that you actually have students use ChatGPT. So it sounds like you already have a lot of practice using it with your own students. Hello, Yoko Sensei. Yes, checking English composition and pronunciation. Awesome. Glad to hear that you are already using AI. Yumi Sensei, welcome. And it's okay that you you haven't had any experience. This is really kind of the beginning point for for you. So I'm really going to start from the beginning, walking through how you might use it and give you some tips on how to use it. Yasuko Sensei, once welcome. Hello, Ian in Tokyo. Wonderful. Awesome. Noriko Sensei, welcome. Great to hear that you have already used it with students to enhance their writing and reflect. Rie Sensei from Fukuoka, welcome. Yes, okay, so some of you have used ChatGPT, and I think this is probably the most common. We're actually going to mainly be using Google Bard, and I will talk a little bit more about why I prefer Google Bard for teaching and learning. Wow, lots of people, wonderful, from all different parts of Japan, and lots of a mix of different people who have used it or not used it to create teaching materials or to have them edit. Great. Reina Sensei, awesome. So you are doing the paid subscription, the ChatGPT Plus, the 4.0. Awesome. It's quite expensive. All right. Awesome. So some of you have used it, but not necessarily in the classroom or for teaching. Hello, Nori Sensei, welcome. Great. So good to see that there is quite a mix of different people. And I love this because I think there will be a lot of opportunity as well to share some of the ways that you have used AI in your classes if you have. All right. So first, I want us to define what is AI or artificial intelligence. And AI is not something that is new. It didn't just come out a year ago. So it's something that actually has been around for a while. And AI or artificial intelligence is technology that builds systems to think and act like humans with the ability to achieve specific goals. So we actually use this every day, probably. So if you use Netflix looks at what you watch and then it recommends additional shows. It could also be a personal assistant like Siri. So if you have an iPhone, Siri, or if you use Amazon Echo, these are assistants. You can ask them questions and it acts as an assistant and gives you some answers. We also have on Facebook photo recognition, right? So you upload a photo and then Facebook might say, is this you tagged in this photo? Or is this so-and-so, maybe a friend that you have? And it's also something that is part of apps like Duolingo for language learning. So Duolingo looks at what you do well, what mistakes you make, and helps you practice and repeat and notices the different kinds of mistakes. Now, one thing that I want to point out is that AI is actually everywhere, right? We see it in many different places, and AI is often undetectable. There's no thing that will say AI has been used. And so that's really important when we think about specifically how we can detect if students have used AI. The short answer is no, we actually can't really fully detect it. And I'll go into that a little bit more. So generative AI has been a new tool that came out last year. And so it has really changed the world and taken the world by storm. And it first started with ChatGPT, which is a tool developed by the US tech firm OpenAI. And what ChatGPT is it's trained on a massive amount of data, basically everything you can access on the internet. And it processes and simulates human-like conversation. So for those of you who have used AI, ChatGPT or other generative AI, you'll notice that you can kind of have a conversation back and forth, right, with this AI model. Now, In addition to ChatGPT, which is a language model, Google Bard, Bing, and Anthropic are also very similar in that they are generative AI models. There are other types of generative AI that can generate art, and generate videos, audio, photo, presentations. So lots of different applications of generative AI. So how does it work? Essentially, AI is a fancy version of autocomplete. So if you're ever texting, and you'll notice that at the top, it has some suggestions for the word that might come next. That's essentially what AI is doing. It creates a prediction by seeing what words or numbers or other data comes up often, usually what comes next. So if I say, for example, 1, 2, 3, probably you're going to guess what I'm going to say next is 4, right? That's what it does. It predicts what will come next. And it uses this data to learn. Now, AI uses data and then practices. And this means that it's able to make decisions or predictions. So here's an example from AI Edu, which I'll talk a little more about later. It's a great resource. But it takes, for example, many faces, and then it practices noticing what is a face, the different kinds of faces. And then from all of that learning and knowledge and data, it can recognize different faces and say, yes, this is you. Now, one thing that I want to emphasize is that AI is not just self-sufficient. We as humans should direct AI. So instead of thinking of AI as a robotic vacuum, so when you think of a robotic vacuum, usually you press a button and then it automatically just vacuums by itself. We are not in control, right? I mean, we can pick it up and move it, but usually we do that so that it will do its own vacuuming without us having to actually direct it. Instead, we should really see it like an electric bike. And I think electric bikes are quite popular in Japan because some areas are very hilly, right? And on an electric bike, the human is aware, right? The human is fully in control. They're holding the handlebars. They are telling the bike to turn right or left, right? Or go straight. But the burden of actually pedaling is less, right? The effort that you use to pedal is multiplied by the technological enhancements. Okay? So we should really consider AI as this instead of as an electric vacuum. So let's talk a little bit about what are some of the benefits of using generative AI. Specifically for teachers, there are numerous benefits. And I think some of you who have joined this seminar have already identified some of these ways and used these. So it can save time giving feedback to our students, right? If we think about essays that we have students write, and then we have a stack of papers that we are maybe having to mark, that will take quite a long time, right? And often we have quite a large number of students. And so that can be very, very time consuming. AI can essentially look at the student writing and give some feedback to that writing, right? And so it can be a much faster process. AI can help create teaching materials as well. This includes not just lesson plans, but activities, quizzes, It can generate model sentences, examples, paragraphs, and it can even pull some information. If, let's say, for example, we are trying to teach about global citizenship, we can ask it to write a paragraph about global citizenship. Now, generative AI can also automate some administrative tasks. And what I mean by this includes things like writing emails, writing recommendation letters, things like that that may take some time for us to do, it can do quite quickly. Now, once again, I want to remind you that we should treat it like an electric bike, not just a vacuum. And so it's something that once it generates, I highly recommend still looking through and being critical and considering, is this what you want or not? Now, while we won't talk about using AI with students in this session, I do want to say that it can have some real benefits for student learning. It can help tailor the learning for students. So since it is something that students can use on their own devices, whether that be a computer or something else, it can help really focus on what that student needs. It also allows for new and different interactions. So not just getting feedback and being able to kind of have a conversation with the teacher or with peers, you can have a conversation with ChatGPT or Bard. And it's an adaptable feedback loop. So let's say that you are asking ChatGPT to practice having a conversation with your students. It can change based off of what the student says or focus on different aspects. Now, I want to also highlight the drawbacks of using generative AI. And this is something that we really need to consider as teachers and as people who are working with youth. So first, AI is everywhere, as I mentioned, and it is undetectable and constantly changing and updating, right? And AI is trained on everything on the internet, including copyrighted materials. So we know that the internet isn't just all free source, open source materials that are free to use. There are copyrighted pictures, copyrighted articles, books. And so that's something that we need to consider and think about, is that there are copyrighted materials that are used. While it can't necessarily just give you exactly what that copyrighted text is, that's something to consider and think about. AI can also show bias, right? And part of that is because humans are biased and we may have some different prejudices or assumptions about people based off of what they look like or who they are. So, for example, if you ask AI, what does an entrepreneur look like? Most likely that entrepreneur will be a man and will be Western and white, right? Because that is what the vast majority of kind of the information out there might show. And so we know that not all entrepreneurs are male, right? There are women entrepreneurs, and there are many different ethnicities and races of entrepreneurs. And so this is something that we also need to consider, is what it can generate might reflect some bias. The next consideration is citation and original work. And I think probably as English teachers, we have faced this already with our students who try to ask ChatGPT or Bard to create an essay or finish their assignment, and it is not actually their own writing or work, right? So this is something that we need to think about. Do we actually cite ChatGPT or Bard or Bing when we are using AI? It's not super clear because AI isn't necessarily a source, right? But of course, it is important to teach students to disclose when they have used AI. I think there is still a debate around what this will look like since it is so new. Another consideration is privacy. So AI uses not only information from the internet, but also whatever users are inputting into it for its learning machine model, right, or machine learning model. And so this can put students' privacy in danger. That's why it's really important to be careful to not include personal information when you are asking ChatGPT or Bard or Bing to generate some of these materials. So for example, if I were asking generative AI to write me a letter of recommendation, I am not going to put the student's name or details. I might be general and say, here are some of the things about this student, but nothing that's going to be identifying. And finally, AI is not completely factual. It is, it includes false information. It will make up information, and it creates plausible but wrong information. And I just want to illustrate what that looks like. So here is a video of when I asked ChatGPT to give me a list of dog-friendly places in Kyoto. So I have a dog, and I wanted to bring her with me to Kyoto. And wow, look at this great list. These 10 different places of where I could take my dog. But actually, if I went to these places, not all of these places allow dogs. So for example, Kyoto Botanical Gardens, which is number 7, does not allow dogs, right? I went to Kyoto Botanical Gardens and there was a big sign that said dogs are not allowed, right? So even though ChatGPT gave me this information, it does not mean that it is true. One thing also to note is that ChatGPT and other, well, specifically ChatGPT is not connected to the internet. So it's not Google. It can't do an internet search, right? They have limited data that they are working off of. So some of that information may be out of date. So if I ask ChatGPT, for example, about some of the conflict that's going on in Israel and Gaza, it would not have any recent information because that information is too new. And the current, maybe the paid version of ChatGPT may have a more updated version, but currently the most recent information, I believe, is from January 2023. So anything that's happened after January 2023, any other additional information that was added onto the internet will not be part of the model. All right. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of how we might use AI to support teaching and learning. So let's look at Google Bard. I really like Google Bard, and there's a couple of reasons why. First is that Google Bard is, unlike ChatGPT, accessible to the internet. So it is slower than other AI models, but more sophisticated, and you can turn off the chat history, which is good for privacy. Now, one thing I want to also mention is that ChatGPT and other AI models often have a requirement for the age. I believe that for ChatGPT and Bard, it is 13. Now, before this video keeps going too quickly, I just want to just show you what I was asking. So I decided to ask Bard, what is Bard? Right? Now, unlike ChatGPT, which kind of goes line by line, making it seem like you're having a conversation, Bard generates it all at once. You can play an audio of the answer that Bard gives, and you can also make the answer simpler. Right? So if I scroll down to the bottom, you can see it makes it shorter, longer, or simpler. So I can click that if I want to change the language level. Now, I'm going to ask, how can Bard help English teachers? Right? And it's going to generate some ideas for me once I input that. Takes a few seconds. And then we can see there are some ideas, such as creating personalized learning materials, providing feedback. Now notice that there are many different drafts or versions. So if you don't like one draft, you can look at the other ones. At the bottom, you can see that you can export the answers into Google Docs or into Gmail. And you can actually click search and evaluate Bard's statements. This is something that I like because it tells me whether it is correct or it's just making things up, right? So now you can see in red, this statement may not be 100% true. Now, I'm going to go ahead and ask Bard to create a lesson plan. And I'm typing in create a lesson plan for 13-year-old English language learners in Japan for an English language lesson focused on conjunctions, right? And the focus of the particular topic is going to be the wonders of Japan. Right? In this 45-minute lesson include models and examples for students. And the focus of this lesson will be on speaking and listening. I want it to include detailed steps and make a table with things like the timing, the activity, the description of the activity. And I also want it to actually give me the reading passage. So I'm typing in, provide a reading passage about a wonder of Japan that is less than 100 words that will show examples of conjunctions. So notice that I'm being very specific here, right? The topic, the grade level, the objectives, the materials, right? And it's going to take a little bit to generate. But then it will go ahead and give me a full lesson plan, right? Notice it's breaking it down like a typical lesson plan that has the grade, the learning objectives, the materials, and then the actual procedures. It includes a warm-up, right? And it actually gives me the definitions of conjunctions. And then it gives me an activity as well as a reading. So here you can see the reading passage, which is about Mount Fuji, a wonder of Japan, as well as the examples of conjunctions from the reading passage. Now, I asked it to put it in a table, but it wasn't able to do that. I can, if I really want it to be in a table, I can add that in as well. And as you can see, there are multiple drafts here. So here we go. I write, please put this in a table. So now it's going to be maybe a little bit easier for me to see the different steps. So it has the timing, the activity, and the description. And you can see here, I can also export this into sheets. Okay, so let's look at ChatGPT now, and let's look at another way that we can use ChatGPT to support our teaching. And here I'm going to ask ChatGPT to provide feedback for a student writing piece. And this piece is just a sample. It's not a real piece. I've just made it up for this webinar. And it's going to give me some feedback. Now, notice that it gives me the original, a revised version, as well as feedback. But this feedback is really long, and probably my students, if I gave this feedback to my students, it would be too much. So I'm going to ask it to simplify it, right? It's not student friendly, so I ask simplify this feedback for a 13-year-old student, right? So now it is giving me some feedback that I could actually share directly with the student about this piece of writing. Now, one thing I just want to mention is that there is this button to record. So if you use this with students, they can actually speak, right? And there are some different add-ons and things that you can, plugins that you can add so that you can include some recordings. So let's say you want to use ChatGPT as a speaking partner for your students for speaking practice. They can hit that microphone button, which will allow them to record what they are saying and have a conversation. Awesome. So some of you have only used ChatGPT. I'm going to actually use both ChatGPT and Bard, as well as Bing, so that you can have a variety and understand some of the differences between them. All right, so I want to also show how ChatGPT can create a model text, right? So I'm going to ask it, please write a model poem using a limerick format, right? A limerick poem. And the topic is going to be about Japanese autumn. Right, so I'm going to type that in. And it's going to go ahead and give me a limerick. Now, one thing I want to mention is that there's some research that's starting to come out about this. And you'll notice that the poem does follow a limerick format, but what research has shown is that when you give, for example, a poem generated by a ChatGPT and a poem generated by, or actually written and created by a human, and you give them to people and you say, okay, which one do you like better? Which one sounds good? People will actually choose the human written poem because it has more voice and it has a human touch in a way that generative AI doesn't. Will this change? Possibly. Maybe generative AI will get to the point where it sounds human and it can be as creative as humans. But at this point, it's not quite, it's missing something, a human element, right? So people actually prefer the human writing, right? And it has more voice and is more interesting, right? Remember, generative AI is only just replicating what's already existing and creating things that are very similar. Okay, so I see a question. Is the microphone or recording function available in the free version of ChatGPT? Yes. So the version that I am showing you here is the free version. I always advocate for free stuff because as teachers, I know we are not paid super well. We're not paid like CEOs, although we should be. The work you do is amazing, but we don't get paid that much. And so I always advocate for free versions. And so everything I'm showing you now is possible in the free version of ChatGPT, Bing, and Google Bard. Okay, so when I give it some general directions, it will not be very specific. The more specific I am, the better the response actually ends up being, right? So I can actually kind of have it read it, say this is a good response or not a good response, right? I can make it do it again. Let's say I don't like it, right? And I say, I don't like this. Please generate this again, right? So maybe I read the poem and I say, I don't particularly like this, right? So it can generate different versions, just like Google Bard is. Now, the more specific I am that I put in, the better the output is from generative AI. So I am going to write a paragraph of 100 words about the best sightseeing spots in Kyoto. It gives me this paragraph, and I'm noticing, okay, this is not something my students will be able to read. So I'm going to be more specific, and I'm going to ask ChatGPT, change this paragraph to be more appropriate for beginner level English learners, right? And I might include some other details, right? So the more specific information I give to ChatGPT, the better the response will be for my specific situation, right? So things I can include are the number of words. So maybe there's a word limit, the level of the reading passage, the topic of the passage, right? The age of the students who will be reading the passage, the grade level, the subject, right? You can also include different pedagogical approaches, the size of the class, right? So these are all different things that that are specific ways to adjust your prompt to generative AI. All right. I see your question, Yumiko Sensei, and I'm going to address that in a little bit about TEP-CUP. Okay, so here is Microsoft Bing, and I am going to ask Bing to create a 15-question multiple choice quiz for my English language learners ages 15 to 16. I'm specifying they are in Japan, and I want this quiz to be about choosing the correct tense and specifically to focus on past tense. So maybe we've just finished a unit, and in that unit, they are practicing different types of tenses. And so I'm going to ask them to go ahead and do that. Okay, sorry, we're going to skip this part because it's going to make sure I am human. And then once I've done that, and it says, yay, then it will allow me to go ahead and generate the questions. Now, Microsoft Bing has 3 modes: creative, balanced, and precise, right? And so Bing uses the ChatGPT 4.0 model and is connected to the internet. So this is something that is actually makes Bing, I think, better than ChatGPT. It uses the paid version, but it's still free. It can also, as I said, connect to the internet, and it can create images as well. So, okay, it is generating my 15 questions. And then I can go ahead and ask it to generate 5 essay questions. So maybe I'm asking it to create some essay questions for my high school students. And maybe I want them to specifically focus on SDGs, right? Now, something that I also like about Microsoft Bing is that, let me just pause this quickly. Go back. Is that you may notice that Microsoft Bing has these links, right, that you may have seen. Let me just go back to the right place. And it will actually show me the source of where it pulled that information or give suggestions for additional websites that might be useful, right? So I can ask Bing to give me a summary of SDG 4. I tell it should be about 200 words. It should be intermediate level for English language learners. And I'm going to go ahead and enter this. And you can see it's actually searching the internet and generating answers for me. So you see these like numbers, and then at the bottom it says learn more. So this is one thing that I do like about Bing is that it tells me where it got this information. And that doesn't mean that it's 100% accurate. The websites that it's pulling from may not be accurate, but I can actually go and see what these sources are, right? So let me just show you quickly. So here we can see data.unicef.org and also the UNESCO website. So these are really great because it shows me where it's getting this information from. Okay. Now I can also use ChatGPT, Bing, or Bard to generate activity ideas. So maybe I want some warm-up ideas. So maybe if you are a JET or an ALT who wants to create some ideas for activities, this might be something that you can do. Wow, it's giving me all of these great activities. Notice that it's actually talking about SDGs. The reason for this is that generative AI models will remember what you have typed in before, right? Only a limited amount until it starts forgetting. But let's say you're talking about SDGs, then basically whatever you write after that will be sort of related to that unless you tell Bing or Bard or ChatGPT to not focus on that, right? And so there are these different activities. And what I like is you notice that there are links to these websites, Bridge and TPR Teaching, which are actually 2 really good websites that have some activity ideas for warm-ups. So it will point me to additional resources on the internet. So let's see. Now, one thing to note is that Bing does require you to be signed in, or you're limited to just 4 questions, but you can always start a new topic. So you can see this button right here at the bottom left-hand corner. And this button, basically, new topic, means you will just start a new chat, but it's limited to 4 questions unless you sign in. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and look at a textbook page and show you what I might do with this textbook page. So this is from All Aboard English Communication 1. This is a high school textbook, right, for first year in high school. And I'm sorry that this picture is not great, but basically this lesson is a grammar lesson, right? And the target is superlatives and comparatives. I see that in this lesson, we have some examples with some explanation in Japanese. And then there's some practice exercises. They must write the superlative or comparative here. Then there's this picture of this family. It gives an example. Who is the tallest in the family? Sam is. He is the tallest in the family. And it's going to go ahead and have students write their answers using the superlative or the comparative. Okay. So maybe I am teaching this and I want to really ask Bard to create a lesson plan for this. So just give me 1 second. So you can see this live. So this will be a live demonstration. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and write in the prompt here. Let me just make sure that everyone can see. I'm going to write, create a lesson plan for grade 9 Japanese students at the Aiken 3 level of English. The class is English as a foreign language, focusing on English communication. The lesson will focus on superlatives and comparatives. So we saw that textbook page, and it can create a lesson plan for me. Right, so it's going to go ahead, take a little bit of time to generate. Okay, and so here is my lesson. So here's the lesson objectives, what students should be able to do at the end of the lesson to identify and use superlatives and comparatives, right? To express opinion, communicate effectively. It's being a bit slow, so I'm going to wait for it to generate. Tells me what materials I'll need, right? Whiteboard, markers, handouts, pictures. And then it tells me a whole introduction, presentation, practice, application, right? Extension activities, right? How I can adapt this for online learning if I was teaching online. Right? I wanted to show you this too. Okay, so let's say I did not like that. Let's say I wanted actually just one activity. So instead of kind of that textbook fill in the blank where students are just writing in their textbooks, I want it to be fun. So I'm going to say create a fun interactive activity adapting sentence completion of superlatives for students. Okay, so the activity is superlative showdown. And students are in 2 teams. Here are the categories. They have to have sentence completion cards, and they call out the correct superlative. They get points. Maybe I don't do this in teams. Maybe they just do it by themselves, right? And then look, it gives me the actual activity. The blank animal in the world is the giraffe. Gives me a picture. The blank animal in the world is a blue whale, the largest, right? So it's actually giving me not only the sentences in the activity, but pictures that I might use with the activity. So it's much easier than me having to Google, like, find a picture of a giraffe, find a picture of a blue whale, right? So lots of different things that you can do with generative AI as far as supporting your teaching. So a couple of things I want to mention. Tools for AI for teachers. There's a couple of things that we can look at. I'm not particularly endorsing a specific company, but all of these are just ones that have free versions as well as paid versions. So Canva is one that I really like, and I used to make this presentation, actually. But I typed in superlatives and comparatives, right? And once I type that in, I can see that there are many different worksheets, activities, presentations that I can use to teach comparatives and superlatives. CurryPod is another AI-based tool. There is a free version and a paid version. This helps you create and also edit slides using AI. So sometimes we spend a lot of time creating PowerPoint presentations. This can help generate those. Diffit is a website that uses AI to generate lessons for different topics and articles. So you can put a specific article, for example, or maybe you have your textbook. In the textbook, there's a reading. You can paste that reading and create a lesson from that reading. Note that for this website, the grade levels are standardized for the US. So it's not based in Japan, it's based in the US. Roshi is another AI tool. You can generate different lessons from videos, articles. You can have it generate stories or dialogue, and you can even have it edit your lesson plans. And then finally, one thing I want to mention is the Generative AI for Education prompt library. And I am going to go ahead and post this in the chat box right now. But the reason that I like this particular, let me go ahead and share. Let's say you don't know where to start or the best way to get a good response from ChatGPT or Bing or Bard. This is a great way to go ahead and do that. So you can see here the Generative AI Chatbot Prompt Library. This is free. And so maybe I want to do assessment. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and click assessments. And I want a prompt to help me create a rubric. So create a rubric with an AI chatbot. So here is the rubric prompt, right? So I would copy this and I would paste this into Bard or Bing. But I'm going to change this, right? So I'm going to be very clear, like filling in the grade level and subject, the topic, etc. Right? So, and then it shows examples as well as how to help make this work for you. One point that I want to make is that AI is not just in English. You can also use Japanese. I know that for Bard, it does work generally well for Japanese. And so if you feel like it is quite a lot of work and you want to generate this information in Japanese, you can do that as well. You can write prompts in Japanese, get information in Japanese, and get the ChatGPT to give you feedback in Japanese. Okay, couple of points that I do want to talk about. One, how do we deal with students cheating? So many students, or there has been lots of instances of students using generative AI to complete their homework, their assignments. I think at this point, it's important to consider how we are assessing students or have the writing done in class rather than at home. So we may need to do a flipped classroom model. Can we detect if something has been generated by AI? The answer is no. There is no reliable way to detect if something has been generated by AI, including platforms that are specifically created to check for plagiarism, such as Turnitin. Turnitin does not work with AI. It does not catch if AI has created something, and oftentimes it falsely says that something has been created by AI when it has not. Will AI take over everything? No, it still requires humans, right? So we need to be able to understand, use, and I think this is very important, critically evaluate what AI gives us. We can't just accept it as perfect. It makes mistakes, it has bias, it creates false information. Now, how do we address bias in AI? Now, people are working on this issue, but I think the best way to address this is to have conversations with your students and tell them that AI is not perfect. AI does have bias. So those are my references. A lot of great articles that I've used and information. AI Edu is one that I mentioned that is really great, has a lot of resources around using AI in teaching specifically. So thank you so much for your time. Please feel free to submit some anonymous feedback. This is the QR code for that. And I will go ahead and also put that in the chat box, the link. I'm always looking forward to feedback, both positive and constructive, to see what has worked for you and what I can continue to improve on. But I will go ahead and stop talking now so that I can give you time to write any comments or questions. So DeepL, I wanted to address that. There was a question around what are the differences between ChatGPT and DeepL. So DeepL is a translating system, but it does use AI, right? So it's slightly different. It does use the same kind of model of using learning, using machine learning, using data to learn in order to have better translations, right? I haven't played around too much with DeepL, but that is what I know about it. I'm not quite sure if it would necessarily be able to generate in the same way that ChatGPT does. Please do feel free to mention the things that I've shared in this webinar. This webinar, as well as all of the resources that I provide, are open source and are free. And some of the actual specific websites may be copyrighted, or definitely make sure to cite those sources. But anything that I share is open source, so feel free to use this information. Other questions, comments? Okay, how good would I assess these? Great question. I am going to be honest, not all of them are great. And what I would do is, like I said, we think about AI as a bicycle, an electric bicycle. So it's important to read through that lesson and think about, will this work for my students or not? Some of those require, for example, some like role play. And I was thinking, I'm not sure that that would work that well for Japanese students. They may feel really shy to do role plays. So I can actually then prompt, Bard and say, don't include role plays, right? So use more partner or paired work, I might say that. So they're not amazing, but they're a good jumping off point. I can also specify the type of methodology that I want it to use. So maybe I might say, I really want this to be student-centered. I would like for this to use technology, right? Okay, and as a teacher, oh, okay, so would I accept an AI generated lesson plan for grading? Great question. I personally think that if they would do something like that, it's really important for them to, once again, assess, have some critical evaluation around, are these activities something that are actually good or not? So just like how you wouldn't necessarily accept a student just generating an essay and then submitting it, I would maybe take the same approach. I know that I'm aware of time, so if you have to head out, thank you so much again for spending your evening with me. I appreciate it, and I hope that it has been really helpful for you. You can find the link in the chat box. I will stay to answer questions as they come through. Okay. Any difference on text-to-speech functions among the three AIs? I think that they are fairly similar as far as text-to-speech. I think like when you are pressing listen, the voice that comes up are quite different, right? So each model kind of has their own voice that they use. So that is something to consider, is maybe some sound more natural than others. But as far as the ability to speak and add verbal prompts or to share what students are saying and then have that typed out, I would say that they are fairly similar across the three. All right. Any other questions before we wrap up tonight? Okay, thank you so much again for all of your time. Please go ahead and leave some feedback on the anonymous Google form so that I can go ahead and improve this workshop and share it with others.